Some of this content may disturb sensitive listeners. Tales of the Night Sky. Journey through the celestial sphere to discover the Greek and Roman myths about the stars and constellations. Immersive audio drama for starry nights. Welcome back. This is Season 3.
Ariadne, my sweet. Strange to be here in the darkness. I've only ever known the light. I can't even tell if it's day or night anymore. If my father Helios shines, or if Selene the moon has risen. I'm suspended out of time, Ariadne. My magic doesn't work down here. The stone walls keep out the sky, the birds, the power of the earth. Do my eyes still flash light? I feel as if I've gone blind. I can hear your brother, Asterius, raging nearby, bellowing in his labyrinth. Can he sense that I'm here, I wonder? Your father wants me to die. I'm destined for Hades. So I want to write to you before it's too late. Daedalus has smuggled in a small lamp. I'll try to write this quickly before the oil is used up and it grows truly dark. It all starts and ends with a bull. Doesn't it, darling?
Yes, it all starts and ends with a bull. Sometimes I think that I must be part bull myself. Our family story is so full of bovines. From Io to Europa, to my mother who fell in love with a bull. My father imprisoned her because of it. My brother Androgeus was killed by that same animal. And in the darkness of the labyrinth, they concealed my youngest brother, who really was half bull. I grew up with a sense of shame, and guilt, of course, thinking that everything twisted and hidden in my family was somehow my fault. That's what children often believe, isn't it?
Don't you think it's an ugly world that we live in, Ariadne? The way that men simply rule us. I don't suppose you ever thought you'd read a letter your mother has written you from her prison cell. But this is all your father's will, and he always gets his way. He always fought with his brothers Sarpedon and Rhadamanthus. He always wanted to have a bigger share of his mother's love than the others. And when Europa died, he fought to have her yellow dog. He doesn't even like that dog, but he keeps it as his prize. He can't bear anyone challenging him. He acts as if he's a god, as if being Zeus's son makes him invincible, as if the world owes him everything. He's always determined to win. He makes a very poor loser. When his stepfather Asterion died, Minos swore the throne would be his, and that's when all the trouble began. He was on the shore, sacrificing to Poseidon, and he called on the sea god to confirm his right to rule Crete. He swore that if Poseidon would send him a bull as a sign, he'd sacrifice it in return to the sea god. Minos sent his voice up to the heavens, and the sea seemed to reply. The white waves around us began to froth, and I thought I could make out something emerging from them. The sea rose and churned until the waves solidified and a great white mass charged out onto the shore, trampling the earth and shaking the ground. It was a bull. No one had ever seen anything like it. It was far larger than an ordinary animal. It glowed in the way the gods glow. We couldn't take our eyes off it. If I'd known what it would do to our family, I'd have killed that bull myself.
My brother Androgeus was one of those perfect young men, curly hair and a dazzling smile. I think he was my father's favourite. He looked like a god, but he was clever and kind. He went to Athens to take part in the games. He must have heard that the bull was nearby. I can imagine he went to visit it in its enclosure before the game started, peered in and saluted it. The Cretan Bull. Perhaps it breathed in my brother's scent and knew he was a son of Minos. It had been raging around the country, destroying farmland and injuring people. Somehow, it had been caught and locked up near Athens. The Pan-Athenaic Games lasted a week. Androgeus won all the athletic events, the pentathlon, wrestling, riding. Just as the laurel crown of victory was lifted to be placed on his curly hair, a low rumbling shook the stadium. The hills came alive with the sound, as though Poseidon was shaking the earth, or as if an army was approaching. In rushed the bull. It ploughed through the crowd straight towards my brother and speared him with its horns. Then, as the people fled, it turned and trampled Androgeus to death. It was the same bull that my father Minos had refused to sacrifice.
I begged your father to sacrifice Poseidon's bull. He shouldn't break his oath to the god. He had to honour his pledge. By then, Minos was king. He secured the crown, thanks to the bull, and he didn't care for my advice. He decided to keep the animal. Simple as that. He called for the best bull to be brought from his royal stables, and he sacrificed that ordinary creature to the blue god. As if Poseidon could be fooled by such a pathetic trick.
Once the Cretan bull had killed my brother, it ran wild again in Marathon. Somebody had to vanquish it. That somebody turned out to be Theseus, and it was my cousin Medea who charged him with the task, thinking he'd fail. Now, here was Theseus entering Athens, leading the great white bull on a rope. The animal had once been majestic. Now it was filthy, caked in dried blood and dirt. It walked haltingly, dragging its hooves. Medea had hoped it would kill Theseus. She was saddened to see the hero victorious. She watched him lead the animal slowly up the Acropolis and offer it in sacrifice to Athena. My clever cousin Medea never believed in the power of the Olympians. She was Helios's granddaughter and a priestess of Hecate. Like my mother, Medea possessed magical powers. She wasn't afraid to use hers. Medea had taken refuge in Athens and married its king Aegeus. Now she had to act fast before Theseus revealed he was the king's son, forcing her into exile again. As the bull's blood ran onto the altar, she rushed back to the palace to concoct a poison. When Theseus entered the royal grounds triumphantly, his long hair tied back, his bright eyes shining, King Aegeus welcomed him in. The king believed the young man was a conspirator, planning to kill him. He handed Theseus a bowl of wine that Medea had mixed with poison. Theseus presented his sword to the king, then lifted the bowl to his lips. Aegeus recognized the weapon. It had once been his own, meaning that Theseus was his son. Medea had always thought of Aegeus as an old man. His face was lined, his beard grey. She was astonished at how quickly he crossed the throne room and dashed the bowl of poison out of his son's hands. The liquid spilled to the floor, bubbling and fizzing on the white marble. Medea fled, cursing the turn of events. And I wish, with all my heart, that my cousin Medea had succeeded. I wish that Theseus had drunk that poison and died a painful death. He'd never have sailed to Crete then, and if I'd never set eyes on him, so many terrible events might have been averted. There would have been divine justice in the death of the hero.
The white bull was kept in a meadow. I could see it from the palace. One day, looking out at it, I felt madness descend on me. My mind and body wanted only one thing from that moment on: to mate with the bull. I didn't choose to act like this, Ariadne. I didn't fall in love with a bull willingly. I'm the daughter of a Titan. Power runs through my veins. I like to control events. When your father slept with other women, so many other women, I cursed him and put an end to his evil for a while. But now the gods were punishing your father through me. They couldn't take revenge directly on Zeus's beloved son, so they made me suffer instead. I tried to fight the lustful thoughts. I knew they weren't naturally mine, but they felt so warm and tempting. I felt desperately alive and desired by the animal. I tried to stay clear-headed. I stopped looking at the meadow. I used my magic to brew potions. I prayed to Artemis and Athena. I burnt herbs and lit lamps. But the thought of uniting with the bull made me tingle with joy. Every day my body seemed to be filling up with hot oils. Something was rising to engulf me. And then one night, I looked out of my chamber again, and I saw the bull, glowing in the moonlight, waiting expectantly, and desire shook me. It was as if my whole body was on fire. I couldn't fight the goddess Aphrodite, and she made me fall in love with the bull. You know what happened next, my sweet daughter. I'm sorry for it all. But remember, I didn't choose any of it. It was all beyond my control.
I don't like to look back. I don't want to. I prefer to just tell you about the death of the Cretan bull, how Androgeus was killed by it and Theseus slayed it, how Medea failed to kill Theseus and he sailed to Crete. Yet here comes that tug of memory. I'm pulled back to my father and his hubris, to my mother and her darkness. I never planned to spy on her, but I was young and curious and a light sleeper. It was the commotion in the women's wing of the palace that woke me. My sister Phaedra slept on undisturbed, black hair spread against the pillow, child's mouth upturned in a smile. By the time I dressed hurriedly and opened my door, the corridors were empty. I ran out into the palace grounds through the central courtyard and over to where the huge gates were open, allowing a large retinue to leave. Servants held torches high, flames flickered, and the shadows of the palace loomed above us. I slipped out, following the royal carriage at the back of the procession. I couldn't make out who was inside it. In and out of the olive trees I weaved, parallel to the path the carriage and the servants were taking. I'm good at disappearing when I need to. When I danced outside on the palace labyrinth, I used to command the world. I'd reach the centre, and those watching were enraptured. What no one knows is that when I dance, I'm empty. Something divine fills and moves that empty space within me. When I want to go unseen, I empty myself too, and allow nothing to fill that void. It's as if I disappear. The dozens of servants in the Cretan night didn't even notice my shadow. At the front of the cortege was a strange sight. Daedalus, the palace inventor, was walking beside a cow. The animal was unusually still. 2 servants pulled it with a rope. I saw then that it had been placed onto a wheeled platform. The group finally reached a meadow. Here things grew more complicated. The ground was rocky. The silent cow needed to be steadied. The carriage had to be lifted. Finally, everyone came to a halt in the centre of the meadow. Daedalus went to the carriage and offered his hand up to the occupant. A slender arm emerged. A cloaked figure stepped out. My mother, Queen Pasiphaë. She shouted to the servants, and they dispersed, stumbling in the darkness. They'd been commanded to leave their torches planted in the ground. My mother began to laugh. She raised her arms to the heavens and let her cloak drop to the earth. She stood naked in the flickering light, golden-skinned, mesmerizing. Now I could believe in her powers as a sorceress. Her eyes flared orange as the flames around her. Helios's beautiful daughter. After a few minutes, Daedalus approached and took the naked queen's hand. And as if they were strolling through the palace grounds, he led her to the cow. He opened a hatch in the side of it. I saw then that the heifer was made of wood, with the hide of a real animal stretched across its body. Daedalus helped my mother up into the cow. He closed the hatch and wheeled the contraption further into the field. I should have left when the servants dispersed. Something terrible was about to happen. Something my mother didn't want her father, the all-seeing sun god, to witness. That's why she was here at night, while Helios slept. Daedalus hit a gong. There was an angry bellow in reply. It was the bull. Its huge white mass rose. It pawed the ground angrily and started to charge. Suddenly it slowed, stopped, sniffed the air, approached the wooden contraption greedily. I turned away, closed my eyes, curled onto the ground, making myself as small as I could. And though I didn't see it happen, I can never, ever unhear the sounds of my mother mating with the bull.
When the madness finally lifted, I found that I was pregnant. I've always loved all my children. I would love this one too. My pregnancy was uneventful. A gentle time. Do you remember? No one was prepared for what came next.
Queen Pasiphaë had regained her clarity, but the white bull had gone mad. Its eyes were red, froth dripped from its mouth. It could no longer be contained. Every day farmers lined up outside the palace to complain to King Minos that the bull had trampled their enclosures, crushed their crops, injured their children. The bull was spreading terror, and the people were angry. They complained that now Talos, the metal giant, had been destroyed. There was no one to protect them. Finally, my father sent word across the sea to Tiryns. Might King Eurystheus consider helping a fellow ruler by dispatching the hero Heracles to Crete? The reply arrived promptly in a ship. The vessel docked, the hero tumbled out of it, muscles oiled and flexed under his lion's cloak. The applause was deafening. The whole island had turned out to see the demigod. They soon loaded him with garlands of flowers, baskets of wheat, jars of oil. He dropped the gifts into the arms of a palace attendant and sprinted away, keen to complete his labour. He found the bull in an olive orchard, ramming into the trees. Heracles tackled it to the ground, then drove it straight into the sea. Some of the crowd had followed him in carriages. We watched the hero wade into the blue water with his short, muscular legs, pushing the bovine in front of him. He awkwardly clambered onto its back as the waves hit the shore. No one was cheering now. Crete is a nation of bulls. The animals are sacred to us. We once worshipped them, now we respect them and have reared them to perfection. Our youths aspire to be bull leapers. At the festivals, young boys and girls jump over the bulls. Watching them leap and fly, I've often longed to do the same. They say the god Dionysus was born with bull horns, and that he's bull-faced. Though I wish this wasn't so. Zeus turned into a bull to carry my grandmother Europa to Crete. Bulls are divine chaos. I thought of all this as I watched the bulky hero Heracles treating the bull as if it was an oversized dog. And now he sat astride the giant white back, bobbing in the sea. He decided to ride the animal back to the mainland, even though our harbour was brimming with ships. Back at the palace, I amused my mother with the story. Her belly was round, and in spite of everything, she seemed happy. I wish I could have paused time. It passed far too quickly.
When the birthing began, the child in my belly began to stir and howl, as if he'd just awakened. Out he came awkwardly, legs first, the perfect body of a little boy.
The pain ripped my mother apart. I stood outside the room, hearing her screams, praying to the gods to keep her alive. The servants ran in and out, panicking. Through the partially open door, I glimpsed the midwife bending over my mother, looking pale. I slipped into the room while everyone was too busy to notice. The queen lay with her eyes closed, tightly gripping her newborn in her arms as he breastfed. He was swaddled in purple wool, the colour of royalty. His little golden legs kicked out into the air. His hands reached up to touch my mother's skin. A servant closed the door brusquely. At the sound, the baby turned his head. The woolen wrap dropped, and his eyes locked with mine. Eyes that were large and round and brown. He had the face of a little bull, and jutting out of the top of his head were two blood-stained horns. My brother, the Minotaur.
I love all my children, and I loved him, even when everyone said he was monstrous. I come from divinity, and I know what it is. I named him Asterius, Starry, because he doesn't belong to this realm. In the palace, they whispered that he was an eater of flesh and a monster, but I suckled him at my breast, and he never harmed me, and his baby hand gripped mine as the milk flowed. They call him the Minotaur, as if Minos made him, and as if Minos's crimes made him. And your father forced my friend Daedalus, our palace inventor, to build this son of mine a prison. I suppose it amused them to create a labyrinth underground, a perfect copy of the one that's outside, the one that you dance on. They took Asterius at night, while I slept, and they locked him up in that terrible maze. But they can't take away a mother's love. I think you love him too, Ariadne. I'm innocent, my sweet. I want you to know that. But justice has no place here in Crete. Your father makes sure of that. Do whatever you must to survive, my darling. I know you'll think of your little sister Phaedra first, but Ariadne, please think of yourself. And always, always stay in the light.
The constellation of Taurus, with its V-shaped horns, graces the night sky between autumn and spring in the northern hemisphere, and spring and autumn in the southern hemisphere. It contains the wonderful Pleiades star cluster, as well as the Hyades. If you find yourself looking up at Taurus, I wonder what will you think of? Zeus as a bull abducting Europa? Io as a heifer? The Cretan Bull, father of the Minotaur, or all of these tales? The Cretan Bull was caught by Heracles as his seventh labour and was later killed by Theseus, as you heard. Its death marks the end of one chapter in this complex tale. But the story continues into our next episode as Theseus arrives in Crete and we finally descend into the labyrinth. I've been pursuing the bull on and off over the years, ever since I dreamt about it one dark night and it lodged itself into my psyche. I've chased it through lots of stories, including one of my own, then onto the island of Crete and into 2 Mithraic temples. Finally, it's led me here to these constellation myths. Roberto Calasso writes, "In any Cretan story, there's a bull at the beginning and a bull at the end. But I'm not sure there really is an ending. It all feels so incredibly circular." This episode of Tales of the Night Sky was written and directed by me, Bibi Jacob. It features Rose Romain as Pasiphaë and Bibi Jacob as Ariadne. Sound and production by Geoff Chong. Inspiration for this episode comes from fragments of Euripides' lost play, The Cretans, and of course Roberto Calasso's The Marriage of Cadmus and Harmony.